Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining us again for an incredible webinar to talk about AI and RevOps, 5 strategies that actually work. This is an interesting topic. I think we've seen AI in every capacity, but how does it actually work with RevOps? So hope you guys are excited to join us today. Our webinar is being sponsored by our incredible partner, Rattle. Rattle's a workflow automation platform that supercharges revenue teams. So to dive in a little bit more about it, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to David Lee, who is going to do a short round of introductions, and then we'll get started. So thank you guys so much for being here. Also, in AirMeet, you will see that there's a Q&A section. Guys, drop your questions, your comments. You want to know more, we'll be answering them live at the end. So hope everybody enjoys.
Awesome. Thank you, Gina. Good morning, everybody. My name is David Lee, and I currently run business operations here at Rattle. You may be, a lot of you may be RevOps professionals, and I've been in the profession, I think, the last 7 years in go-to-market ops. And I always like to say people trip in to RevOps. It's not usually a planned career path. So for me, I wanted to share that I tripped into it after starting off in finance. You may be asking about what Rattle does or what Rattle may be. I just wanted to kind of clarify that Rattle, it just makes sales processes easy to follow. And we do that automating workflows and using AI to connect your tech stack with Teams and Slack. I would love to turn it over to Chris, who is one of our panelists. I know Jen is running slightly late, so I think she'll be on soon. But Chris, would love for you to introduce yourself to everyone on the call.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so my name is Chris Stabile. I am one of the practice directors over at Operatus, formerly known as Admin Within, for those who know us from those days. We are a RevOps shop, kind of full-fledged consulting firm doing kind of everything from front end to back end of your rev process, go-to-market operations, kind of all the moving parts. So yeah, and I've actually been in RevOps for longer than I wish to admit, but been doing this a long time, and really, enjoyed kind of seeing all of the growth and changes in the industry and kind of what's happening, and seeing AI kind of pop in the last couple of years as a big, a primary tool that a lot of people are talking about. It's pretty exciting. So,
yeah.
Jen. Hi, Jen.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, Jen. Fabulous timing.
Well done.
So sorry, I'm at SaaS Stock, which I'm really excited, and could not find a room that was quiet enough and all that, but I managed to sneak into a room and I'm good to go.
Awesome. So Jen, we're just doing a round of intros. Do you want to introduce yourself to the group?
Totally. My name is Jenny Gartois. I am the CEO of a company called GoNimbly. Similar to Chris, we are a revenue operations consulting company. Also similar to Chris, been around longer than I care to admit. I started off my career in marketing operations and pretty quickly realized that anything I did in these top of funnel platforms, or if I came up with new lead scoring or new campaigns, I really needed to align with sales and CRM and all that kind of work. And if I didn't, all my work was going away. And so that's where my obsession with essentially unifying the experience, unifying the business stack, and not letting your internal bullshit get in the way of the customer experience really came about. And then fast forward a few years, we created GoNimbly, and we're proud to work with big brands like Twilio, Zendesk, Intercom. And fun fact on this side, I also make board games. So I also have a B2C $25 product. Yeah, it's very fun to run these I run that one really badly, by the way. It turns out B2C is very different. I've learned some lessons there, but it's fun to have kind of both sides of how do you have an impulse buy, and then also how do you operate giant SaaS companies.
Very cool. I didn't know that. You were making board games, Jen. That's such a cool side gig. I have to ask, what's your favorite mainstream board game? Mine's Settlers of Catan, but I have a feeling that's not, that's too mainstream.
No, I like it. I do like it. I don't know how mainstream these are, but there's a game called Splendor, a one game of the year a few years ago I really liked. If anyone's a big nerd. And then if you like chess, chess. There's a chess variation called That Time I Killed You, where you play 3 different chess games, like simplified chess games at once. Very cool, very nerdy.
Wow.
I have one as well. If
Oh, you
have
do, Chris? I was going to ask.
Yeah, if you haven't played Ravine, it
Oh,
is an
I haven't heard of that one.
incredible party game. Incredible, like it's basically a card game, but it's essentially you and your friends are trapped in an island or on, your plane crashed and you have to survive, and things happen to your group as you play the game, and it gets weirder and weirder as you play. So it's a lot.
Wow,
of fun.
Ravine, you said, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep that one in mind.
Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you both for the intros. So we're going to talk about AI and AI strategies as it applies to revenue orgs, revenue operations. But I think a great place to start. Actually, I wanted to maybe talk through our own human experience with AI in the mix, and that could be, I assume a lot of us are in recurring revenue businesses. Your experience as a lead, prospect, as a customer, or even just a regular human being outside of work. I want to kind of talk through that as a starting point before we get into some of these concrete strategies. So I thought it would be fun to have some sort of conversation starter here. How well do you think you can tell that an email has been written by AI? Do you think you're good?
Are you going to like show us something?
No. I'm not that well prepared. But I guess I feel like the tells that I use, I feel like there's certain words, like keen as an adjective, maybe. Like when I see that, I'm like, man, normal people don't really use keen as an adjective in the US, so those are some of my tells. Anything that you kind of have as flags or like, oh, that must be AI?
Tone.
It's so funny. It's funny that David has a filter on the word keen in his email. Yeah, tone's a big.
Yeah, tone's an interesting one, right? Because it's a human that. Sorry, I realize, Jen, you and I are probably going to accidentally talk over each other because of. Apologize. The tone piece is really interesting because I think it's this idea that there is like supposed to be the right way to write an email, and actually the better your email gets, the more likely to me it looks like it's written by AI, right? And I think that's like a big piece of it, is that there's a difference between like a content writer who understands how a human actually speaks and interacts, versus sometimes you see kind of these weird tonal changes within one single message, and that's like a funny kind of call out for me, something that usually like warns me that, hey, this is just somebody using a tool. And the excessive emojis.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, definitely the emojis. Yeah, and some of the words. Anything that you have, Jen, that are kind of flags? You mentioned tone as well, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I've got like a definitely like I'm looking for specific words, but I'm always really amazed at how quickly I delete emails. Like it is so fast that I can identify that was not meant. They know me, do they not? I sit here and just delete triage my email in seconds. So we innately know when an email is meant for us and if it's important.
Yeah. I think we get bombarded with so many emails these days, and I feel like, at least for me, personal filter, if I see something that strikes me as AI, then I almost discredit it in certain cases where I just, it's my experience with that, email kind of changes, and that outreach and whatever the content is. So, no, this is all very helpful. So I guess I want to kind of in this kind of thread, I want to talk about kind of the topic of using AI to enable meaningful interactions, right, for our customers, for our prospects. Jen, maybe I'll start with you. Anything that you want to kind of double click in that sort of topic?
In terms of meaningful interactions and the importance of it, I think we have to protect human touch when we're talking about how companies engage with your brand, ensuring that we are creating a really great experience and making sure that we're not using AI to an extent where we're ruining that.
Hey Jen, I think you're cutting in and out a little bit with maybe we try videos off for you and then see if that improves the audio. Do you mind just
I'm gonna switch Wi-Fi's. You guys keep going.
Okay. Got it. I think on this topic, I feel like for me kind of the outbound, like kind of cold outreach piece sticks out, where I feel like when I'm trying to be sold something for the first time and someone trying to win my trust or credibility, I feel like I don't want to spot some of those obvious things that tell me like, hey, like this must be AI. So Chris, I see you nodding. Anything you would add on this topic?
Yeah, I think it's almost like I almost don't feel that I need that. I don't need any touch. I want to understand the brand a little bit first. Like my kind of, and I guess maybe it's just a personal preference, but like I don't need to be sold right away. Like first I want to understand who is this product? What is it? What does it do? Before I'm really interested in having a conversation with anybody, whether it's AI, human, whatever it might be. And I almost feel like you run into some of this weirdness with, the tools that have been of the trade for a long time with any of the journeys that people are building and things like that, where you just get blasted with recurring emails. It's like, hey man, like I don't need to follow up with you about this. Like I'm, and don't send me this, hey, I'm going to try one more time. And then I'm like, please don't do that. Right. It's like, we know what this is. We don't need it, So yeah, part of me almost feels like it would be an opportunity to kind of take that initial conversation out of the like conversation part of it, right? I don't need that level of, I want to know what a product is first, right? And I almost am more comfortable if someone's not trying to pass it off as a person, right? It's like, I don't need that. It's unnecessary, right? At that level. I'm more curious about, hey, what is the product that you have going on? Where does it fit into kind of my business? Where can where can it add value for me? So that's kind of from my perspective where I almost feel like we should be shifting our approach a little bit instead of just, and Jen, you know this better than anybody, like the marketing mentality is changing. And I think we're almost overusing some of this kind of journey stuff and oh, hey, now we've just augmented it with AI. Like it's not necessarily going to help you close business, right? You kind of need to step back a little bit.
Well, I think
really helpful.
With the entry of AI, we're going to see the importance of in-person and those deeper connections become more important because we're bombarded with so much more messaging. It's too easy to create content. You have to create something interesting, different, connect, get that human experience. That's not to say that if you have an SMB, like small amount of money, you're going to have to automate. We can't put people on everything, but protect that, big experience and big revenue and big customers by ensuring that you have a human-led experience when necessary.
Yeah, those are such good points. I feel like I feel myself drawn more to in-person events these days. I work remotely. I don't know about both of you, and coming out of COVID, and it feels like I crave those experiences and kind of cherish them more and more. So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, and I mean, Jen, to your point, like the difference between a scaled company that's already doing this stuff en masse versus a smaller shop who's got to do things in a different way. There are so many ways to augment and improve, right? But you don't necessarily need to have kind of that like ultra high level version of, blasting every single person that's out there in the market. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think talking about that, like, okay, so AI, right? Like we all want to insert AI into our business and there's a bazillion ideas on how to do it. But I'm gonna steal this idea. Jonathan Moss from Xperity Health has a podcast called, I think, Go to Market AI or something along those lines. And he explained breaking out AI into two things: automating and your existing work, and then like truly changing and like creating new frameworks, right? So there's these two buckets of work. So like the first one is definitely great. What are people doing today that we can enhance? and make faster. Research is really easy, right? SDRs are going through and going to LinkedIn, and now we can use Clay and other tools to automate scraping and say, this is what this person said, this is what they care about, this is the number of employees and all the demographics that you need in a way that's really easy to grab. And now you just saved 20 minutes to an hour of research. Awesome. We've just taken the existing framework and existing process and workflow, and we've made it faster and better. And then the other one is basically like, what has become obsolete? What can we truly change? How can we do things that we never did before? And, for example, we've done work on identifying usage trends to elevate and push customers to do certain actions to increase conversion. We weren't doing that before. We've used AI to give us insights that we didn't have before. And so truly trying to separate those two things, the first one is easier.
Jen, do you mind doing a double click into what you just mentioned around the increasing conversion piece? Maybe some of the mechanics and how you kind of structured that, I think would be helpful for just to understand some of the pieces.
Yeah, so we've done this work with a few of our customers, and one of the things that we were looking at is, great, I have a customer, they're using my product, I think they're happy and healthy, but how do I know and how do I identify that they need an expansion conversation, an early renewal, or maybe there's a churn risk, and how do I give that information to the salesperson to have a really great human-led engaging moment to do whatever needs to be done, convert, save, renew, fill in the blank. And one of the things that I've realized through doing this work is that we've done a disjustice to our sales teams. We basically give them a lead and we're like, hey, lead source webinar, good luck. And this is like a thing about, don't just automate your existing process. You have so much access to usage and demographic data and intent data, et cetera. AI is making it easier to collect that information and normalize it and put it in the hands of your rep. So that to me would be great. How are we using the tools that we've got in a way to make our process better, not just do the same thing? And so one of the easiest things that we've done that creates money is you've hit your usage threshold. I don't know how many companies just wait till renewal to say, hey, by the way, you used too much, but I'll just put it in your renewal. And I kind of missed out on that revenue. So that's an easy flag, is you're at 90% of your usage. Let's have a conversation.
That's a really, really cool use case there. Chris, I see you nodding. When we think about this framework, like, do we augment, do we automate, do we overhaul and reimagine? Anything that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's super interesting is that, there are ways to augment that also create opportunity for experimentation, right? And I think that's a thing that we aren't talking about a ton, because it's, with generative AI in general, I think it's been such a big focus, but there's all these other really powerful AI applications, including like, hey, I can now do a level of communication and testing of different kind of approaches with clients that we could never do before, right? And so talking about hey, this approach to communication with this type of layered journey, right? Great, this is doing X, and then I'm going to try a completely different version with a different rep that's doing kind of using these AI tools to kind of help support what information they've already gathered. Talking about research, right? You have all that research up front. You can also use AI to kind of automate that upfront communication and just letting the client kind of control the conversation a bit until it obviously needs to be as a person having those communications. So I think those are some really big ones. I think the other side of it too comes from the conversations you are having with clients and taking the information out of those conversations to make them actionable. Like, this is something that we deal with on a regular basis, is using these, the tools like Gong, like Fathom, that do all this the recorders for your conversations. The amount of data that you can gather from those conversations is incredible. And I think that was something that it existed before, but I genuinely we're seeing it now everywhere, and it reduces your kind of lack of info, your lack of actionable insights, right? And you don't necessarily need to rely on the rep to come away with something truly profound from a conversation, right? So talking about, hey, Is there an opportunity here for growth? Is there an opportunity for expansion? They might have missed something that the customer said that the AI might pick up on and put it in front of you. Now, obviously, the human element still needs to be involved. You need to review that data, look at the call transcripts. But the way it's been shrunk down into something consumable now, I think is incredible, right? And, makes it so that you just have no excuse not to review what did you talk about.
Yeah. We all have a ton of different tools, of course. We're using Gong, but you talked at the beginning, David, about spotting AI. I use their follow-up email almost verbatim. Notes, action items, and then it will tell me risks to the deal. And I do feel enlightened after I'll be like, oh wow, yeah, they did hedge a lot on pricing. So they are probably a little more price sensitive than most. I might have not caught that. I also think that there is some really big magic in AI doing coaching for you because it's not personal. When I have a bot tell me, hey, you used too many filler words, you spoke too much, it's I'll read that and go, okay, great. If it takes I don't know, it's not as vulnerable in some ways.
Yeah. I think what you both mentioned is such low hanging fruit. Where if you're running a some sort of sales motion and or let's just call it revenue motion, where you have these regular interactions via recorded calls, Zoom, Gong, Chorus, I think you got to take advantage of just how much AI can do to compress that information so concisely for you up front. Where at Rattle, we are, we were always a little cautious about jumping headfirst into AI, and we started to just test internal things. So the first thing that we tested, we use Gong, and so ingesting the Gong transcripts, doing very targeted coaching, like what you mentioned, right? And we've sort of automated that to flow into our Slack channels and each deal channel, right? So that right after the call ends, there is this very short feedback loop right to the AEs and the sales manager on what happened. And then we do something called deal risk indicators, right? Where AI is really great at analyzing the sentiment on the call. And then you get the feedback within 10 minutes of that call ending, right? And so you have that fresh in your mind, right? And then you can actually have the bandwidth to action on it right then and there. So I think those are such high conviction use cases for what people are doing now.
We have the same tech stack. We're also using Rattle, but we have, when an opportunity gets to stage 2, deal room gets started, and after every single call, the transcript and those deal risks. I actually thought it was Gong, and it's Rattle, David. So I'm sorry.
I think Gong has their own too, but
I'm using yours actually, and it is pretty amazing. Again, you're going from call to call. Having somebody AI pause and give you those insights, I think is it's been invaluable. I've identified what to talk about in my next call because of it.
Yeah. I feel like it's almost like having a team just to do a lot of the upfront work for you, whether it be the call stuff, personalization. I think Chris or Jen, we mentioned all the research that you need to do upfront, all that stuff. AI should be giving you that starting point, right? The higher jumping off point to do other things that add value.
Yeah, I think research, follow-up, and then data normalization is a big one. We used to do all this work. I remember back in the day, they were called contact washing machines. We used to do them in marketing automation, where if title contains yada, 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 and try to map to function and role. And try to take CEO and say, okay, there's C-level and, their founder or whatever, trying to split things out. And now you can actually feed that, double check it because it does hallucinate, but you can feed that in and automate this stuff. And we talked about Clay, but Clay can call the chat GPT, normalize something, break it up into things. And you no longer need these big, giant data, automation tools in order to do some basic things. And it is wild how much cleaning up your core data points does to a business. If you have one field for industry, annual revenue, function, role, location, whatever all those really important data points are for your business to segment, score, route, report. If you nail that, you are going to de-silo the organization so much more than you think. Like, it is one of those small projects that create really lasting efforts and a lot of just clarity to your business. And it used to be expensive to do that, and now it's pretty cheap.
Yeah, it used to be a human effort, right? It used to be a massive
team of analysts,
human effort, right? And now it's off and running. Yeah, it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's cool.
You know, AI has been around though, right? Like, it's like we kind of saw this explode with ChatGPT, just generative AI. But like it's not like it hasn't existed in certain ways, and even in applications of the revenue org.
Yeah, that I think that's one of the most kind of interesting things that's going on in the last couple of years, is that we've created this hype around AI. AI has been around, and there are already some incredibly powerful tools that have been around doing some of this kind of complex work, right? There's actually one, it's called Conversica, that does this really cool, like, it basically gives all of your AEs their own personalized assistant, right, for when they're communicating with customers. And again, it's not perfect. It's not designed to be the deep kind of human conversation that you're looking for, but it does a lot of the kind of a qualification process and can help augment your SDRs. It can help augment your sales reps, and it can give that opportunity. The moment that the questions are out of its comfort zone, the tool basically hands it off to a human, and there's this incredibly cool, seamless transition. And I mean, that tool's been around for years and years and years and years, right? And it's getting better because of generative AI, right? So that's a really cool thing, is that now it's even more powerful than it was before. But this, I think that we have to be careful about how much we let the hype kind of stress out our ops organizations, right? I think that that's something that we've heard a lot of, right, Jen? Is are we behind, right? Are we waiting too long to get into the AI game, right? The AI game has been around, right? We're still kind of, obviously it's getting more and more powerful. But it's not new necessarily.
Yeah, you haven't missed the train. Train's moving, and it's going to move for a while. I'll hot take it a little bit and say what is different is we've democratized the access. And so what we're finding too in data, and we is BCG, it's not me, is that I think it's something, don't quote me on this, I'll send the link afterwards, but I think they said 75% of companies are like using AI, but only 20% have adopted AI. And so like there's still, a long way to go before people feel like they've adopted it. As you can imagine, the younger generation, your Gen Z is like over, I think it is 75% also are using it, where it goes down to like in the 50s for, and you get up to the boomers. I even think these numbers are high, to be honest. Like I read it and I was a little bit skeptical of it, but I do think the thing about ChatGPT that's different than, say, I don't know, the Industrial Revolution, the last one that was like this big change, is that companies had access to this information. And actually, now it's down to the individual, and the younger generation is buying their own tools. That was something that I thought was interesting in this article. They're buying their own access to their own AI tools, and they're using it. So it's not that the company is enabling their team with really incredible AI tooling and AI. It's actually that individuals are coming in and making themselves more effective, which I'm into. Like I actually think that it brings power to the individual.
So it's been more of a bottoms up motion, this movement, than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, you have these giant, look, OpenAI, I'm sure, is having these conversations with enterprise level companies to transform their business in these huge ways. And of course, Chris getting beaten up by a fly. And of course, that's a huge investment. That will be a lot of innovation in a lot of different places. We've all seen robots that can do dishes now. Like, yes, that's going to be at the enterprise level. But from an individual perspective, for $25 a month, you can make yourself, like, you can save yourself 5 to 10 hours a week. If your company's not giving you access to these tools, go do it. Take a little extra vacation. Take a little midday break. Like you're now creating productivity for yourself. And I think that's a really beautiful thing about the kind of space in AI we are right now.
Yeah, that's it's such an interesting piece of this, right? Because absolutely has it democratized the access to this stuff, and it's also I mean, the reason why I think a lot of companies are having this conversation about like, are we behind, is partially because I think all the people on their teams are already using these tools, right? If they're right there and they're available to them, they're sitting there going, wait, are we missing something? Like, why are we not figuring out how to use this at the whole company level, right? When our people are already doing it, right? And I think, there are so many ways that people are using these tools that are not, it's not just about kind of the big work, but like things like the voice automated voice generation. So like you don't necessarily need to go get, and again, not to put voice actors out of work, but if you need to turn around something quick for a marketing campaign or something, you can now actually use a tool versus back in the day, it sounded like a robot, right? So like, that's a really interesting kind of minor tweak, right? Or, hey, I want to spruce up a deck, right? For my spruce up a deck for an internal meeting. And now I can use DALL-E to create images, right? Like it's not, it doesn't need to be at that highest level. I think some of it is really cool at the base level. And I think it kind of makes it, as it becomes a part of our just regular life, I think you're going to continue to see people finding better ways to leverage it in the kind of bigger ways, in the bigger picture.
And I think that's where maybe one of the practical things that ops professionals or just revenue leaders need to be doing is to be listening intently to all the ways in which their AEs, their sales managers are using these things in innovative ways, right? Because I think it's so easy to just think top down and say, hey, like we as a company need to use AI, pound the table. We're going to do this, versus embracing kind of some of these things that are going on organically.
Yeah. Even a tool like Lavender, right? I mean, we're talking about marketing efforts. We're talking about how AI can kind of muddy kind of when you're receiving an email. Well, there's tools like that out there that are helping AEs score their own emails, right? And like, hey, I sent this email. How did it do, right? Like, did my clients actually engage with my writing? Or, hey, can I get some help rewriting? Like, it's not, you actually make the human effort even more powerful, and you're giving yourself kind of your own feedback loop, right? Which is really cool.
Yeah. If I take it back to what we kind of talked about earlier, which is, hey, there's one angle here, which is automate existing processes. That's your low-hanging fruit. Like, go do rep rides, go sit with your anybody in go-to-market, marketing, sales, CS, understand their workflows, sit there. Then you can take it back and say, okay, what parts of that can I automate? Listen for something that takes them a long time, error prone, things like that. Great. We're going to automate their existing workflow. That's all the research, drafts of, I don't love messaging going out completely automated, but choose your own adventure depending on your customer. But having, that piece, the follow-up, you're going to have all of those. There's some coaching opportunities too, to give people kind of real-time coaching, through AI. There's a company called Luster that's doing it. That's pretty cool. So awesome. You're going to do that on your beginnings. Then, there's the part that you're going to have to use your big brain to identify things that, break up the norm. Maybe there's a process that you're doing today that you don't have to do at all because AI can do it for you. And in those, I think you have to take a design thinking mindset. It's like this kind of gap first thinking mindset, which is go identify, is there a place that you're losing deals? Like, are you losing them because you're not getting back to somebody quickly enough? Great. Go figure out how to automate and use AI to make that lead to meeting process much quicker.
Yeah.
Or are you losing, your deals at stage 3? Okay, well, what's going on there? Are your proposals taking too long to create and, other vendors are getting in there faster? Or are they not, unique enough? Or like, do we need to switch the process in such a way? Like, that's where we have to start to get creative, but try not to think about it like boil the ocean. Like, oh my gosh, I have to come up with this big idea. Start with the actual hypothesis that you have. Start with a place where there's actual pain in the organization. Then people are willing to invest in it, and maybe you might get some money and an idea to test things out. But also you're going to solve an actual problem, not just use AI for the sake of it.
Yeah. I think that's a huge piece too. the whole concept of like, is how much of this is hype, right, versus the reality of what we need to be doing in our day-to-day work streams, right? And I think we talked about, research before, and I think that's experimentation on this stuff is so valuable, because you're giving your reps the ability, instead of coming into a meeting cold, they can come into a meeting warmer on a more kind of fast-paced basis, right? So I think that's a piece of this too, is you remove a lot of the admin work, right? Which I think is one of the things that we always talk about in RevOps and go-to-market ops, is how do we kind of reduce the lift of the sales organization and get them back to selling, right? I mean, we talk about that term all the time, but it's reality here is that these are the kinds of tools where you can use that and really get to a place where you're adding value to your business, your teams. I think I would love to see more of that, right? And see people using it as experimentation. And to your point, Jen, it's not about automating all your emails, right? You don't want to see, hey, Chris, who works in industry at company, like, I've seen that email before.
Oh,
and
man.
it's like,
Cringy.
So, at a certain point, we got to be careful about that part. But
yeah. Hi, Jen. I noticed you went to UNC and that you're the CEO, and it's like, cool. Yeah, we're messing that up. But one of the things that you reminded me of, and I'm not going to remember the whole acronym, but this is based on this book. I think it's called Peak Experiences. They look at Disney World and their ability to create peak experiences. And there's this framework about how you create a peak experience. And there's 4 ways. I know the acronym is EPIC, but I'm not going to remember them all. But one of them, like the E, is elevate some experience they wouldn't have otherwise had, a wow effect, surprise, that kind of thing. And you can do this in product. You can do this like in an email. You could do it small. You could do it big. I forget what the P is. C is connection. I is insight, something they didn't know about themselves, or so connection. You tell 2 people, hey, you didn't meet. I know you'll be I think you'll be really incredible. You'll like each other, whatever. They'll remember your brand and you, like dinners that have the right people in. And I feel like I met them through your brand. Like all of that is really great connection. Insight is something that I think AI can do a lot. Imagine if you get on a call with an SDR and they're telling you things about your industry and your business that you didn't know. Hey, 25% of your competitors are doing X, or I compared your quarterly report with somebody else's and I noticed this, or, for me, I might say, wow, I noticed your biggest competitor has 3 times the size of their RevOps team than you. Like, that's the kind of very cool insight that can create that peak experience. I just left that intro call smarter than when I got here. I'm going to associate that back with you and your brand. So I think also thinking about, yes, AI, time saving, automation, hire less people, all that good. We'll run out of that stuff. We'll run out of ideas. We'll make things so streamlined. We'll get to a point where we'll have to think about, how does it create a peak experience, or how does it delete problems that I once had and made them obsolete? I think that's the fun stuff. And if you focus on kind of that insights piece or connection and whatever the P means, I think that will be a really kind of interesting space to see how AI can create peak experiences, that it's not just humans needing to do that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. I feel like as we kind of as I'm trying to think through the key points that we've discussed so far, and this like automate, augment, overhaul, it seems like we're kind of pointing to, hey, make sure you start small. Make sure you start with just bottoms up, observing the things that are done right now and seeing if you can tweak small pieces of it first, versus thinking about going crazy and thinking about a completely blank slate about when you look at your business. And I think some of the things that have come up are research, right? Make sure you arm SDRs, the people in your kind of that are the tip of the spear of your revenue organization. I think we talked about rep coaching, rep training, signals that AI can give you from your interactions. I think, Jen, you mentioned, kind of as it relates to retention and churn, certain ways that we can craft a process for better retention and more expansions. anything else you would add kind of to that, like practical, hey, like here are some things that we've seen, the small pieces that you and your clients, that you personally have done that have worked well in revenue orgs? I don't think we've talked about data entry.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one where we can.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about it with like data normalization and entry and all that kind of stuff. So Deirdre in the chat sort of asked a little bit of a leading question here about integration AI across the tech stack. And I think that's, we're seeing a lot of consolidation in the space. We're lucky, I think, in some ways. We don't have to come up with this. Like Rattle, for example, you've already given us the risk identification. That's using AI. It's just somebody else incorporated. You don't have to log in and do that stuff. Awesome. You've got Gong doing similar things. We have like these tools that are giving that to us. So I think, Deirdre, one of the things is these platforms that you're already paying for are rolling out AI features. Make sure that you're utilizing them, because part of this is adoption and getting folks to use what you've got in your hands instead of coming up with net new. And then when we're talking about like optimizing it, yes, we need to make sure that there's data normalized in a way that a rep or a go-to-market individual can consume it and utilize it and like at their fingertips. And I think that's a place where integrating it is really key. Like I can go normalize data in a spreadsheet all day and tell ChatGPT to normalize things, but if it's not getting back into the system, that's a problem. I feel like Clay needs to pay me for some reason. Like haven't stopped talking about them, and I don't have a reason to, that I'm not affiliated with them. But I think even looking at, okay, great, that's doing things like calling multiple enrichment vendors, bringing it in, normalizing it. They're also scraping any website that you tell it to and bringing in data points. They can also go into LinkedIn and look at your prospects' last 3 posts and give like a summary about what they might care about and draft you your first email. You can push all that into Salesforce to a place where like, I'm not asking a rep to go, hey, ChatGPT, I have a meeting with David. He's the VP of BizOps at Rattle. Here's his LinkedIn, here's his whatever. Can you give me, I'm not doing that. Like I'm not even asking the rep to do prompts. Like I'm embedding that into their workflow. So what's Nirvana for me? Nirvana is I log into my CRM in the morning. I open up my list of people that I have to reach out to. If I'm a CSM, it might be my red accounts or expansion accounts. If I'm an SDR, it might be new business. I'm clicking on it and I'm getting like a summary, which is like, hey, this person has been really engaged. Here are the top champions already using your product. This is the industry and what they believe and what they, care about. Here's how I think you should approach. Here's a playbook on how I think you should approach the next call. Like that to me would be Nirvana of like a super integrated, I've normalized data, I've scraped things, I've given you my recommended playbook. And ideally it's a one click and, it's all gone and in the ether and I've made a bunch of money. But I think that's where we should be shooting for. And I would say this is a passion of mine, but I think the more that we really put ourselves in the shoes of our go-to-market team and give them the information at the fingertips that they need to have a really amazing human-led moment, that's the peak experience. It's not the email. It's that phone call in which I get there and I say, hey, I know your business. I know what you need. Let me help you. And how do we get folks to that?
Yeah. And I think it's, listen, we are talking about a peak, beautiful, perfect world, right? And we recognize that we're not there yet, right? And I think that's part of why we want to be working with your go-to-market organizations. Like you have to be spending the time with these folks to understand not just what they want, but what they need, right? Like what are the actual pieces of information that they're going to get from data consolidation, from, hey, I used this recording tool and it pushed all of my next steps directly into Salesforce, right? Things like that will give them kind of that next ability to have that good conversation. Absolutely is, that's incredibly important. But I think it's also important to call out, when is it not working, right? And keeping an eye on that and keeping that perspective that you need to be constantly improving on these processes and even not that, OpenAI is not necessarily taking feedback, but we do want to make sure that your internal team is giving feedback to your operations organization to tell you, hey, this worked really well, or hey, this stuff that you guys gave me was garbage, right? So it's all about preparation.
Yeah.
Like you want them to be prepared for the conversations. You want to give them the ability to operate more quickly, but you also don't want to like kind of leave them out to dry. That's one of the reasons why I think the whole idea of this constant experimentation is so important.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, you bring up a good point on feedback loops, and I think this is something. If you have a generalist mindset, which is like, yo, we've been alive and we've been doing business for a while, and we've learned lessons, and we need to ensure that we're still applying them. So think about top of funnel when we were sending leads, and you got a lead. You were allowed to say, this is not relevant, disqualified, and give a reason. Like we should be still doing these feedback loops back with content, a recommended next step, etc. If it's irrelevant or wrong, if we're elevating a churn risk to a CSM and they're like, no, this is a really happy client, they haven't logged on because they've been on vacation for 2 weeks, they got married. Like, I need to be able to say, no, I disagree. And in the models that we've done with our customers where we send alerts, they're allowed to disqualify and say, I'm taking no action and a reason why. So we're only going to get smarter. The human insight and element and context is still there.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I feel like with respect to a lot of these models, it's the feedback loop, just making sure that what you continuously put in to train and kind of optimize whatever process, whatever you've put into place is such a key factor. I see another question around, like, do you have an AI team, right? And so I'm curious, like, kind of your take on, like, who owns this in the revenue org, right? Like, who's supposed to take it forward?
Short answer, no, don't have an AI team. And even shorter answer, I don't have an answer to that. So
Yeah.
I'll pass it to anybody else that does. What I have seen, I've seen company-wide encouragement, space or to do AI testing, whether it's the 2 companies that come to mind. I know Telnix has done like a lot of, and they've written about it, basically contests and with prizes and encouraging their employees to use AI and build, these ideas. We've done a few too. We've done basically hackathons where we've allowed, a team to take a day to basically figure out how to automate part of their processes. Chili Piper is also writing a lot about how they've integrated AI into their workflow. They have a really big, it's coming top down. Alina, their CEO, is very, she's like a big nerd about AI. So I think it also helps when you've got leadership very invested. And so, I think it's definitely, cultural, creating, thumbs up, and creating the space and doing that piece. We work with Intercom and they've thrown a lot of money into AI and they have whole teams working on it. And it is more kind of internal for their own product to get it out to market, but they're also doing it a lot with their go-to-market processes. So, it takes investment, I think, from the top down. I don't think my customers have an AI team, but there are individuals who have been kind of tasked and given space to experiment.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly, we do not have an AI team, and I don't think I'm not seeing that trend necessarily across our clients yet, and from kind of the ranging of Series A all the way up to the big ones and the public ones. Like I think people are very conscious of it, and that's why they're asking these questions of, are we behind? Do we need to have a team, or do we just need to be investing our energy in it? And I think where I'm seeing kind of this, and it not to buck the trend, but I think it's important to understand, to your point, Jen, where does AI add value in our experience, in our process? How can we help our teams do things better? Where can we automate? Where can we augment? Sure, those are conversations that should be happening, but it's not, I need to invest heavily in an AI team, otherwise we're going to be out of business in 6 months. Like, that's just not a reality. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't at least be considering it. And I mean, David, you asked a really great question, which is like, where should this fit in the revenue org? And I think realistically, I don't think we're ready to say this is a data team thing. Or, I mean, I like the idea of this living in an insights group, right? I think that's probably where you're going to be best, kind of get the most out of it. But I think it also can be kind of its, work underneath kind of your more leadership group. But I think that's perfectly fine too. But I see an enormous value of there being kind of an insights focus to it, instead of it just kind of letting people run wild. Because again, at the business level, what do we need to get out of AI versus at the individual level? Like, you might have teams using the tools, but when you're talking about how does the business need to use the information, I think your insights group is probably going to be a powerful place for it.
Yeah. I am going to contradict myself for a sec. I just had a memory unlock that was recent, which is I did have a client recently that had an OKR that they had to implement some AI feature into their website by end of quarter, like top down must do. They could throw money at it. It was fine. Like, it could just be like, here's a tool, here we go. Like, it didn't have to be like created by the company. It didn't have to be IP, but how are we adopting kind of one AI workflow change? And, that's, again, incentives work and accountability work. So some other thing is just, how do you create a forcing function? Because we're all very busy. Taking the time to like step out and try to automate or change something is hard. So I think incentives is a lever to do it.
Yeah, those are all such good points. I hope that, and my experience, and it's probably a narrower view than both of yours. I'm sure you work with a very wide spectrum of clients, but when I talk to prospects, customers, they don't have a team, and they don't have a well-defined structure and process in which they go forward on AI initiatives. And I think that in and of itself should almost be empowering to someone who is like, hey, like, there is nothing in place, and yes, like, I can actually go learn more about these things, think about those high conviction ways that I can experiment, and automate some of the existing pieces in our org, and be able to kind of build these business cases that they can take to their leadership teams and whatnot. And I think that when I think about especially RevOps, right, I think they're in a great place to be able to do that with kind of a wider view of the revenue org.
Yeah, because I don't love the idea that just insights gets this investment. Like, to me, like, across the board, find a problem, and if AI is a good use case, let's go. Yeah.
No, that totally makes sense. I'm just trying to make sure that we have addressed any questions that have come in.
Winston asked one.
Yeah, I don't one to you guys, because I don't have the answer to this, but is there analysis accuracy of AI models and scores of these different platforms? Like, do we know which ones are good and which ones we can't trust?
It's a great question. I actually, I think pass as well, but I do think that a lot of them are using some of the same AI tools. Like, I don't think that they're actually building from scratch their own AIs, right? So I think that they're probably using the existing models that are out there and just implementing it into their platform. So in those, yes, if there's somebody who's building something from scratch, ask the question for sure. But I think as much as we are already trusting things like ChatGPT and those kinds of tools, I think that if you are leveraging that functionality within another tool, it's okay, right? Like, I've seen, like, for example, I think I'm trying to remember I think Sonar uses it for it automatically generates your like details section of a field, right? So when you're hey, I created a new field, or I'm doing a data dictionary, and I'm not necessarily interested in writing all the notes about what that field is, well, GPT kind of through Sonar automatically generates it for you. Things like that are really nice. Again, not world changing, but especially for admins who are going through a new org and going, what is this that was built? It would be nice to have, all those details, right? So I think that's, I don't feel like I can confidently say, yes, you can trust XYZ tools. I don't think that that's a place that we can come from just yet, but
yeah, I think at a very like base infrastructure layer, like, I think it gets really technical in comparing these models, right? Like, I know there, like there's something called an F1 score. There's like accuracy versus precision versus recall. And I think it gets really complex, but I think we've come to a point where what is more important is how well you're tailoring those models, how well you're kind of designing, some of these models to fit into your process. And if you're training these models, that's where you really unlock the power. And so I think it's safe to say like that base layer is little, and again, caveat is I'm not an expert, but like I think it's more of a commodity kind of at the bottom layer, and it kind of comes down to how well you architect kind of the rest of it downstream.
Yeah, and I think that was true with any automation and normalization that we ever did, right? Like as RevOps, when we knew there was a 80-20 rule. Take something as simple as deduplication, right? We automated that. There's like matching and figuring out. We were going to get it wrong if like you had to choose. How aggressive do you want to be? Like I could get really aggressive and do like broad matching based on just name and company, or just name, location, or something. I'm going to make mistakes, or I can be very certain and I'll do it this way. It's the same thing here. If you want to be really sure, you can have things go into extra fields, not override data, have a human check.
Yep.
If you want to take a bit more risk and say, hey, I'm likely to get it wrong, I think you start moving that threshold down. You start in the easier, I'm pretty certain 99%, and then you bring it down.
That's a really, really good point. That's a really good point.
I completely agree with that, right? Like, are we really talking about, the reality of a new tool or a new piece of technology, right? We understand there has to be some kind of ability to dig in and kind of affirm that it's, hey, this is really going to actually be used the way that we want it to. So, I mean, and it's funny, Shaman asks an interesting question too about, as we're seeing the saturation that's happening and we're seeing all these tools, right? That kind of over levered mentality and that I think that's a really interesting place for us to be playing in, because I think we've talked about this a bit, but it is absolutely going to be one of the problems that will need to be solved potentially by the next generation of AI, or humans coming back into the fold, right? I think we need to look at it as an opportunity for us to dig in, open up, ask kind of smart questions about, do we really want to automate this personalized email, or should we use it to kind of start at that high level, right, and like reevaluate what's going out to the customers. But I it's an interesting kind of piece as well.
Yeah, I think those are all such interesting points, and like it's there's a lot of monitoring, a lot of kind of keeping up to date work that I think we all need to be doing, just as some of these things evolve in the very near term, probably, right? So yeah.
And the tools are already out there, right? The tools are out there to tell us when something is written by AI, and it's not for nothing pretty easy to. I mean, I've seen more than a few LinkedIn posts, more than a few blog articles, more, and it's something that like you don't want to get caught doing that. That's like a really silly. I mean, it, again, is what it is, but it doesn't exactly send the right message that you couldn't be bothered, right? So that's good.
I think we're right about at time here. Any closing thoughts, Jen, Chris, or?
Yeah, I think don't be scared off by people talking as if they figured this out. We're all in it. We're all figuring it out. Try to find a gap, a problem, and automate that. And we talked a lot about low-hanging fruits. Like, of course, go for that, right? Like, go automate some of those early things. Go sit with your reps. Go figure out what time savings you can do there. That's where you're going to have those immediate wins.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think again, it's let's treat AI for, as it is now, right? Hey, this is an incredibly exciting time for this technology. And I think it's really cool to see how it's growing, how it's changing. But it is not something that's like, hey, this is fully baked. It's still getting better. It's still, and so keep kind of that mentality about it, and keep kind of digging in, making sure you're doing your own assessments. And again, there's nothing to be, you're not too late, right? Like, it's not there. There's always an opportunity to kind of dig in more and learn more about this stuff. Nobody, to your point, nobody has it perfectly figured out. So
So empowering. I feel like I need to go and do some AI work now after this call. Thank you, Chris, Jen, for your time, and thank you everyone for your engagement on the webinar. I think the LinkedIn post links are here if anyone has any follow-ups. But thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.